Queen Camilla thought her secrets were safe until King Charles opened one file that changed everything. Hidden inside were unauthorized signatures, secret transfers, and the name of a man from her past. What began as royal duty quickly turned into heartbreak, betrayal, and a full-blown scandal. Caught between stolen legacy and rekindled infidelity, Camilla's world unraveled fast. And when Charles discovered the truth, he didn't just confront her, he called for her arrest. The monarchy would never be the same. The file that changed everything. It began on a quiet Monday morning in July 2025 with King Charles III seated in his private study at Buckingham Palace, sipping Earl Grey and reviewing estate files. His mind was preoccupied with parliamentary matters when a thick envelope from Clarence House landed on his desk. These were supposed to be routine documents, royal estate updates, charity summaries, perhaps a few items regarding Queen Elizabeth II's legacy. But halfway through the packet, Charles's heart skipped a beat. One line stood out: approved, Camilla, Queen Consort. That signature alone, made without his consent, triggered alarm. Among the documents were redistribution plans involving family lands in Scotland, 18th century porcelain, and even Duchess of Windsor's diamond brooch, passed through generations. The estate items were labeled as non-essential, designated for auction or public lending. More disturbing were handwritten notes indicating museum partnerships and private transfers marked for expansion of charitable liquidity. Charles scanned the pages again. There was no signature of the sovereign, no official seal, no council input. The implications hit like thunder. Camilla had approved changes to the Queen's legacy without consulting the monarch. Charles sat frozen, the file gripped in his trembling hands. It wasn't just the items listed, it was the deeper betrayal. His mother's final wishes, delivered to him at Windsor Castle shortly before her passing in September 2022, had been crystal clear. Protect what I leave behind. It is not treasure, it is the soul of the monarchy. Now, someone was selling that soul behind closed doors. A legacy meant for generations was being shuffled like inventory. And worse, it had been done by the woman he had defended for decades. He called for his private secretary at 10:45 a.m., his voice low but firm. Schedule a private meeting with the Queen Consort tonight. No staff, no advisors, just us. The wheels were in motion, and the trust that had endured over 30 years of scandal, love, and compromise began to crack. For Charles, this wasn't merely a breach of protocol. It was a violation of sacred memory. What followed next would rewrite the royal order. As the clock ticked toward that evening confrontation, Charles's mind raced through what else might be hidden beneath the polished floors of palace tradition. But what he didn't yet know was that Camilla's actions were just the surface. A deeper betrayal, a personal one, was waiting in the shadows. Cheating hearts and hidden hands. Even before the scandal with the estate files, whispers had floated through palace halls. In May 2025, Camilla had attended what she described as a wellness retreat in Windsor, citing exhaustion and a need for clarity. Charles, busy with climate summits in Edinburgh and engagements in Berlin, trusted her judgment and excused her absence. But just weeks later, the internet erupted with blurry photographs. Camilla, in a private Windsor suite, leaning intimately toward Anthony Aldridge, a former royal advisor from the 1990s. The timing was damning. The images, dated May 14th, matched precisely with the days Camilla had requested seclusion. Charles was handed the photos by his press secretary on June 3rd, And though the identity of the man was blurred online, palace insiders confirmed it. Charles had once dismissed their early connection as gossip. But now, with the estate betrayal and emotional distance growing, this was a blow to his dignity and their marriage. Camilla's betrayal went beyond marriage. Charles began to suspect she hadn't merely stumbled into missteps. She had orchestrated a dual campaign: emotional abandonment and institutional takeover. She'd moved financial assets, shifted control of legacy items, and maintained a secret relationship, all while smiling in public appearances alongside him. This wasn't just a matter of trust. It was treason against the monarchy's soul. To Charles, the cheating wasn't only romantic, it was symbolic. She had emotionally cheated him of partnership, cheated Queen Elizabeth of legacy, and cheated the crown of its rightful heirlooms. A marriage built on the ashes of scandal now stood scorched by newer flames. What began as a crack in the royal structure was now a widening rift threatening to consume the entire monarchy. If Charles's discovery had rattled the monarchy, what came next would send shockwaves through its foundation. Because one royal wasn't content to sit and grieve. Princess Anne had already begun asking questions, and the answers she uncovered would point directly to theft, deceit, and betrayal embedded deep within the institution. Anne investigates and finds the wrought princess. Anne, Queen Elizabeth II's most dutiful child, had heard the rumors long before they were confirmed. A trusted servant at Clarence House had approached her in early June 2025, whispering concerns about Annabel Elliot, Camilla's sister. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Annabel had designed royal properties since 2010, but her recent activities raised flags. Anne tasked her personal aide, Edward Grantham, a seasoned investigator with decades of service under the late Queen, to dig deep. By June 9th, Edward returned with the first wave of evidence: 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, all linked to shell companies registered under Annabel's name. The transactions, dated between March and May 2025, showed transfers of £7.2 million originating from auction houses. The listed items matched those Camilla had approved for sale, including a sapphire brooch and a set of silver coronation goblets. The trail led further. Annabel, along with Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, had been listed as co-directors of a real estate investment group registered in Luxembourg, planning luxury resorts in Wiltshire and the Scottish Highlands. Anne was livid. These weren't just property ventures. This was a coordinated effort to siphon royal wealth into a Parker Bowles empire. Legacy theft disguised as modernization. Anne's fury boiled over. On June 11th, she arrived at Buckingham unannounced, slamming a folder of evidence on Charles's desk. "Camilla is not just compromising us. She's stealing our mother's legacy," she said. Charles scanned the documents, the same shock returning to his face. Offshore accounts, private auctions, fake charities. The rot wasn't just emotional anymore. It was systemic. The storm inside Buckingham had begun. With both Charles and Anne aligned and Camilla cornered, there was only one place left to confront her. The home where their public fairy tale began, and now where their dynasty's nightmare would erupt: Clarence House. The royal showdown at Clarence House. The confrontation Charles had dreaded finally arrived on the evening of July 17, 2025, at Clarence House. He entered without entourage, without formality, just quiet fury and the file that had upended his faith. The drawing room that once held laughter and warmth between Charles and Camilla now echoed with tension. Camilla, seated by the fireplace in her signature ivory shawl, looked up to find Charles's face pale and hollow. He said nothing at first, just dropped the file onto the polished oak table. The weight of betrayal spoke louder than words. Camilla stood up, startled, her hands trembling slightly. "Charles, what is this?" she asked, her voice trying to stay calm. But the look in his eyes stopped her cold. Charles spoke slowly. This is your last chance. Tell me the truth about Queen Elizabeth's estate, the jewels, the lands, why you signed without me." For the first time in decades, Camilla found herself cornered, not by public opinion, but by the one man who had always defended her. She tried her usual charm, blaming Charles's workload, his environmental trips, his back pain, any distraction. But Charles wasn't moved. He interrupted, voice firm, eyes sharp. "You did this for yourself, not the monarchy, not mate." Camilla's defenses faltered. She leaned into emotion, attempting a last-ditch plea. "I thought I was helping. I didn't mean to cut you out," she said, her voice cracking. "I did it for us, for our family's future." But Charles saw through it. He remembered Diana's sorrow, his mother's caution, and the decades of balancing scandal with duty. He whispered, almost too softly to hear, "No, you did it for your legacy, not ours." The silence that followed was deafening. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing beside the fire, the very place their love had once quietly burned. The weight of Charles's departure lingered in the air. Camilla was left shaken, not just by what was said, but by what wasn't. For the first time since 1995, she felt the threat of exile, not from the public, but from the crown itself. Her attempt to manipulate legacy had triggered something irreversible. Charles's walk through the marble hallway that night wasn't just a retreat. It was the beginning of royal judgment. The Emergency Royal Council. On the morning of July 18th, 2025, a rare emergency meeting was called. At Buckingham Palace, only 4 people were present: King Charles, Princess Anne, Prince William, and Camilla. The royal staff, sworn to silence, described the atmosphere as tense, like a war room behind velvet drapes. Under the cool flicker of antique chandeliers, Charles stood at the head of the table, his mother's portrait looming above. Before him lay documents with signatures, bank transactions, offshore routing numbers, all tied to Camilla and her inner circle. Charles spoke first, reading a prepared statement. "You've violated sovereign protocol, used the Queen Mother's estate without authority, built personal wealth through deceit." Camilla, dressed in deep blue, looked shaken but remained silent. Anne was next. She slammed a file on the table. "This is our mother's legacy, not your blank check." Her voice cut through the room like ice. William, usually restrained, spoke with measured anger. "You made us all look like fools. You turned Diana's memory into a bargaining chip." Camilla's voice cracked. "I admit it," she said. "I thought I could manage things better. The resorts, the investments, they were meant to support us, give our side of the family strength. You all have positions. Tom and Laura have nothing." The air thickened with disbelief. Charles shook his head. "You lied. You stole. You humiliated this family. I brought you into this monarchy because I believed in second chances. But you've turned this palace into your playground." Silence followed. Camilla began to weep, not theatrically, but with real collapse. Anne didn't move. William looked away. Charles stood and issued the final order. "From this moment forward, you are removed from all royal duties, stripped of access to archives, and will live separately at Highgrove House. Your title remains, but your power is over." It wasn't a vote. It was a verdict. Camilla had spent over 30 years clawing her way to the top and lost it all in 30 minutes. The meeting adjourned in solemn silence. As Camilla exited, escorted not by guards but by protocol, it was clear her fate had been sealed not by the tabloids, but by the family she once divided. Outside, the media knew nothing yet. But inside the palace, a seismic shift had occurred. The monarchy had just chosen memory over ambition. And for Camilla, there would be no second rescue. The arrest. No one saw coming. It began quietly. No sirens, no cuffs, no televised escort. On the morning of July 12, 2025, at 8:45 a.m., Queen Camilla was informed by royal household security that her clearance was suspended, and she was now under internal royal arrest. The measure, reserved only for cases of treason, sovereign theft, or grave misconduct, had not been used since the days of King Edward VIII. Clarence's house was sealed. Her staff were dismissed. She was escorted to a secure royal residence in Balmoral, under full surveillance. Charles's formal request to the Royal Constabulary and Sovereign Oversight Committee came after William and Princess Anne backed it unanimously during the emergency meeting. The documents showed not just emotional betrayal, but calculated embezzlement, use of tax havens, and exploitation of Queen Elizabeth II's personal estate. Camilla's attempt to claim she was modernizing the monarchy collapsed under forensic audits showing deliberate funneling of £47 million. This was not modernization. It was theft in lace gloves. Public disclosure came swiftly. At 11:06 a.m., BBC royal correspondent Simon Marr broke the news. Queen Camilla, under internal arrest. Legacy misconduct confirmed. Within 2 hours, the palace issued a brief statement confirming a formal investigation into conduct inconsistent with sovereign values. The press storm was immediate. Sky News, ITV, and international media outlets circled Clarence's house. The palace gates remained sealed. Clarence's house was no longer a royal residence. It was a holding cell. The betrayal rocked the monarchy's emotional core. Queen Elizabeth had passed only 3 years earlier in September 2022, and her final wishes, preserve the heirlooms, guard Diana's legacy, were now defiled. For Charles, the grief turned into fury. For the British people, it was vindication. They had long sensed something was wrong. Now, with the truth revealed, Camilla wasn't just a scandalized figure. She was a convicted traitor to the crown's moral code. As Camilla sat in silence behind locked doors, her empire, once polished with PR charm and sympathetic interviews, began to implode. Because this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the full unraveling of a quiet, calculated dynasty she built with her family. And now, the walls were closing in on the Parker Bowles name. Camilla's secret empire crumbles. It didn't take long. Within 72 hours of her arrest, the Crown Audit Office released preliminary findings. Through a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and private auctions, Camilla had orchestrated a plan with Annabel Elliott, Tom Parker Bowles, and Laura Lopes to transform £47 million in royal assets into a private family fortune. These weren't just reallocated items, they were Queen Elizabeth's pearls, Princess Diana's brooches, and lands in Balmoral and Sandringham, funneled under false claims of modernization. The so-called Wellness Fund Camilla launched in 2023, publicly framed as a charitable initiative for eco-retreats and children's mental health, was the facade. Beneath it, the group purchased properties in Wiltshire and Scotland, filed zoning permits for luxury resort development, and signed contracts with interior designers and culinary advisors. many of whom were close friends of Annabelle and Tom. Catherine's investigators found email threads from May 2024, where Annabelle wrote, "Once the auctions go through, we move on phase 2. Mum says it's all set." The financial trail exposed transactions moving through Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore, carefully shielded through complex corporate veils. Yet Anne's aide, Edward, had already decrypted much of it. Camilla's own signature was on several transfers, most damning. A March 12, 2025 approval for the sale of a diamond tiara worn by Elizabeth during her 1953 coronation, sold through a private intermediary in Geneva for £3.2 million. It had been labeled in preservation rotation. The buyer? A shell company linked to Annabelle. Once the findings went public, the consequences were swift. Tom's cookbook deals were pulled by HarperCollins. Laura's art gallery lost 6 high-profile clients. Annabelle's interior design firm was dropped from a $9 million renovation project at a royal estate. The Parker Bowles family went from elite insiders to disgraced conspirators in a matter of days. Camilla's empire didn't just fall. It was obliterated, brick by gilded brick. But while the public devoured headlines about auctions and offshore scandals, the royal family wasn't interested in revenge. They were interested in protection. Because once a queen tried to rewrite the past, the true heirs decided to seal it, for good. William and Anne locked down the crown. William wasted no time. On July 17, 2025, just 5 days after Camilla's arrest, he signed the Heirloom Protection Directive, stating, "No non-Wales family member shall access any royal vault, archive, or rotation unless granted written approval by the sovereign or crown steward." The document, backed by Princess Anne and reviewed by the Privy Council, essentially froze the monarchy's internal assets, placing the legacy firmly in hands that had never betrayed it. Anne took personal charge of auditing every item marked under Queen Elizabeth II's catalogue. Her team reviewed more than 3,200 entries, from jewels and garments to property deeds and royal correspondence. She cross-referenced them with digital access logs from 2020 to 2025, uncovering multiple irregular sign-outs attributed to Camilla's office. Items like the George IV diamond cluster, missing since October 2024, were traced to foreign auctions and swiftly flagged for repatriation. Catherine, ever precise, took steps to protect Diana's memory. On July 21, 2025, she oversaw the resealing of Diana's personal archive vault beneath Kensington Palace. It was retrofitted with biometric locks, dual verification, and round-the-clock guard rotation. Only 2 people had access, Catherine and Charlotte's future steward. Inside, she left a handwritten note on embossed royal parchment. For Charlotte, in memory, in strength, love, Mummy. That note became an image shared across social media, symbolizing the future, untouched and safe. The monarchy didn't just survive the betrayal, it evolved. The crown wasn't loosened by scandal, it was reforged in steel by William, Anne, and Catherine. Power shifted not by ceremony, but by consequence. Camilla was erased. The Parker Bowles line would never hold influence again. And from that moment forward, every key, jewel, and title would answer only to those who had earned trust, not stolen it. The people choose their queen. By July 25, 2025, the British public had made their decision, and it was swift, loud, and unforgiving. Polls released by YouGov at 9:00 a.m. showed Queen Camilla's approval rating had plummeted to just 12%, the lowest for any royal since the abdication crisis of 1936. Meanwhile, Catherine, Princess of Wales, saw her favorability soar to 88%, nearly matching Princess Diana's historic peak from 1997, just months before her tragic death. The contrast was undeniable, and so was the symbolism. On social media, the nation erupted. The hashtags #Camilla, arrested, #legacy reclaimed, and Diana justice dominated feeds across 81 countries. Thousands of posts compared photos of Diana in her iconic pearl choker beside images of Camilla's arrest, juxtaposing elegance with disgrace. Young people, many born long after Diana's death in 1997, flooded platforms like TikTok and Instagram with emotional tributes. Even royalists who had once supported Camilla admitted the betrayal was too deep. One viral tweet simply read, "She wore the crown, but never earned it." The BBC, typically measured in tone, aired a full-length documentary on July 28th, titled The Betrayal of a Dynasty. The special investigated how Camilla, once seen as a redemptive figure, had quietly orchestrated one of the most personal betrayals in royal history. Featuring palace insiders, finance experts, and biographers, it painted a detailed portrait of manipulation, entitlement, and loss. Over 7.3 million viewers tuned in across the UK alone, an unprecedented figure for a royal exposé. But it wasn't just a media reckoning. It was emotional. Letters arrived at Kensington Palace by the hundreds. One, written by a 92-year-old woman in Leeds, said, "I cried for Diana in 1997, and now I cry for justice. Catherine, protect our girl." Another letter, addressed to Princess Charlotte, read, "You are your grandmother's hope. Wear her memory like armor." The British people weren't just angry. They had chosen a new moral queen. And her crown was earned not through ceremony, but through honor. With the court of public opinion decided, and the nation firmly behind Catherine, the final blow came not from words, but from consequences. Because while Camilla still carried the title of Queen Consort, the palace knew it meant nothing. And Charles, finally ready to act, made the most painful decision of his reign: Camilla's exile and final collapse. On the morning of August 1st, 2025, at 7:30 a.m., Queen Camilla was escorted out of her temporary holding in Balmoral and driven under tight security to Highgrove House. Once a sanctuary she shared with Charles during the secret early years of their affair, Highgrove was now a gilded prison. Under strict terms of internal exile, she retained her title in name only. No staff, no communications, no access to official schedules, vaults, or council decisions. Charles had made the call privately at Windsor Castle during a closed session with Anne, William, and Catherine. While visibly emotional, his voice was clear. She may keep the title, but nothing else. No privileges, no influence. Anne didn't blink. William nodded in solemn agreement, and Catherine, ever silent, simply placed Diana's preserved necklace back into its royal case. The monarchy was done mourning betrayal. It was now focused on restoration. Meanwhile, the Parker Bowles family faced total collapse. Annabel Elliot was charged with tax fraud and conspiracy to defraud the crown, facing trial in London Magistrates' Court in November 2025. Tom Parker Bowles, stripped of all royal culinary contracts, lost his Michelin Guide column after a scathing editorial labeled him the Prince of Privilege and Fraud. Laura Lopes, forced to liquidate her art gallery holdings in Soho, saw $3.4 million in artwork seized by investigators tracing auction laundering. The empire Camilla tried to build in Diana's shadow was crumbling from within. Camilla now lives alone at Highgrove, her days reduced to solitude and silence. Once the most controversial woman in the realm, She now walks the same gardens Charles once designed for her in 1993, haunted by ghosts she helped create. No portraits, no visitors, no letters. Just a title that rings hollow in every room she enters. Because in the end, Camilla didn't just lose the palace. She lost history's forgiveness. And Diana, through truth, legacy, and loyalty, won the war she never lived to fight. Camilla's downfall wasn't just about an affair. It was about ambition, deception, and betrayal at the highest level. From secret plans to sell Queen Elizabeth's legacy to a rekindled romance hidden behind palace walls, she crossed every line. When King Charles acted, he didn't just protect the monarchy, he sent a message. No one, not even a queen, is above truth. Her arrest shocked the nation, but for many it was justice long overdue. Catherine stood quietly strong, Anne stood firm, and William prepared the crown for a future without shadows. As Camilla fades into royal exile, the public turns toward a new era, one built on dignity, memory, and accountability. Diana's legacy, once threatened, now stands taller than ever. Because in the end, history doesn't forget, and neither does the crown. Subscribe for more royal truth bombs and let us know. Did Camilla get what she deserved, or is there more to uncover?